There is a country that will influence the global economy of the next 20 years. That country is India. A country that has overtaken China as the world's most populous nation, is growing faster than almost every major economy, and is trying to transform itself from a developing giant into a true economic superpower. On one side, there is India's scale, young population, technology talent, strong domestic demand, rising infrastructure investment, and growing geopolitical importance. On the other side, there is deep poverty, weak job creation, unequal education, a massive income gap, and serious pressure on land, water, and cities. Today, India is no longer seen simply as a low-cost outsourcing hub. It is being watched as a manufacturing alternative to China, a digital innovation laboratory, a strategic partner for the West, and a central player in the future of global supply chains. If India succeeds, it could reshape trade, technology, energy markets, and even the balance of power in Asia. If it fails, it could become the most important missed opportunity of the century. India's economy has reached approximately $4 trillion in nominal terms, making it one of the largest economies in the world. In purchasing power parity terms, it is already much larger. Growth has remained strong compared to most major economies, frequently staying above 6% while Europe stagnated and China slowed. A country that grows between 6 and 7% for years does not just grow. It changes its position in the world. India has another advantage that many advanced economies no longer have: a large and expanding internal market. More than 1.4 billion people means rising demand for housing, transport, banking, insurance, healthcare, electronics, education, and consumer goods. This gives India a major advantage. It does not need to rely only on exports. It can grow from within. Foreign direct investment also reflects this confidence. Apple has expanded production in India, global electronics firms are building factories, and major technology companies are investing in cloud services, data centers, and digital infrastructure. India is becoming attractive not just because it offers cheaper labor than China, but because companies want to diversify their supply chains. The world learned during the pandemic and during US-China tensions how dangerous it is to be overly dependent on a single manufacturing base. India is one of the few countries large enough to absorb part of that shift. India's median age is around 28. This means it is significantly younger than China, Europe, Japan, and even the United States. India is entering exactly the phase where a young labor force can carry growth for decades. Economists call this the demographic dividend. But there is a condition. A young population only becomes an economic dividend if it is educated, employable, and productively absorbed into the workforce. Every year, millions of Indians enter the job market. The economy is creating jobs, but not always at the required pace or quality. A large portion of jobs remain informal, low-paid, and insecure. This is where India's path becomes uncertain. The country has world-class engineers and a globally competitive elite, but it also has millions of young people without adequate skills for modern industry. If India cannot generate enough jobs in manufacturing, construction, logistics, and formal service sectors, the demographic advantage turns into frustration. If there is one area where India has genuinely surprised the world, it is digital infrastructure. The best example is UPI, India's digital payment system. This system transformed smartphones into instant payment tools for everyone from major retailers to street vendors. By 2025, monthly UPI transactions had climbed well above 15 billion, making it one of the most heavily used digital payment systems in the world. Then there is Aadhaar, a biometric identity system covering more than 1 billion people. Combined with digital banking and mobile connectivity, this system has allowed the government to deliver subsidies and welfare payments to citizens with far less leakage than before. India's technology sector is another fundamental pillar. IT services and outsourcing still matter. But India is trying to move beyond that model into semiconductors, electronics assembly, software platforms, fintech, defense technology, and artificial intelligence. The startup ecosystem is among the largest in the world, and executives of Indian origin now lead some of the biggest technology companies on the planet. India cannot become a true superpower on software alone. It needs roads, ports, railways, electricity, factories, warehouses, and industrial depth. Progress in this area is real, but the gap with China remains enormous. Over the last decade, India has accelerated highway construction, expanded airports, modernized freight corridors, and invested heavily in renewable energy and logistics. Manufacturing is the real battleground. India grew through services faster than through industry for many years. This gave it global visibility but also created a structural weakness. Countries that absorb huge labor forces usually do so through manufacturing first. India needs a broader industrial base if it wants to create enough jobs and reduce import dependence in critical sectors. This is why production-linked incentive programs, electronics assembly expansion, and semiconductor ambitions matter so much. India wants to become part of the next generation's supply chain map. It has already made progress in mobile phone production and electronics assembly. But moving from assembly to full industrial depth is much harder. It requires stable electricity, efficient transport, easier land acquisition, faster courts, simpler regulations, and better vocational training. India is not trying to become China 2.0, but it is trying to capture the opportunities created by China's rising costs, aging population, and geopolitical tensions with the West. India's rise is not only economic, it is also geopolitical. It has become one of the few countries able to talk to almost everyone. It is a BRICS member, works closely with the United States in the Indo-Pacific, buys Russian oil, competes with China, trades with Europe, and presents itself as a voice of the global South. Its relationship with China is of central importance. The two countries are neighbors, two great civilizations, and at the same time strategic rivals. Border tensions have not ended, and both sides understand that the balance of power in Asia over the next 20 years may depend on which economy proves more durable. For many Western governments, strengthening India is not only an economic choice. It is also part of a broader strategy to prevent Asia from being dominated by a single power. India imports large amounts of oil and remains vulnerable to disruptions in the Middle East. At the same time, it is rapidly expanding solar energy capacity and investing in new energy systems. Energy security will determine whether growth can continue without becoming dangerously dependent on external shocks. India has enormous potential but also enormous structural risks. The first is inequality. High growth may look impressive, but if wealth is concentrated too narrowly, consumption weakens, social tension rises, and political pressure builds. A superpower cannot be built on islands of prosperity surrounded by mass insecurity. The second is education and human capital. India produces top-tier talent but cannot do so at a scale that reaches the entire population. Elite success can hide national weakness. A few brilliant engineers do not solve the skills transformation needed for hundreds of millions of people. The third is state capacity. Business conditions have improved in many areas, but regulations, bureaucracy, legal delays, and governance differences between states still slow investment. The fourth is social cohesion. India's diversity is a strength, but if politics deepens religious, caste-based, or regional divisions, it can also become a fault line. The fifth is climate pressure. India is extremely exposed to heat waves, water scarcity, flooding, and agricultural disruption. In a country where hundreds of millions still depend directly or indirectly on climate-sensitive sectors, environmental risk is economic risk. So is India the next economic superpower? The most honest answer is this. India is one of the very few countries with the scale, population, strategic position, and growth potential to become one. To become a true superpower, India must achieve four things at once. It must create jobs at massive scale. It must raise education and skills far beyond the urban elite. It must build infrastructure and manufacturing depth much faster than in the past. And it must preserve social and political stability while doing all of it. If India succeeds, the global economy of the 2030s and 2040s will look very different from today. Supply chains will shift, investment flows will deepen, technology partnerships will expand, and the balance of power in Asia will become far more competitive. If it fails, it will still be an important country, but it will remain a giant whose potential always stayed just out of reach. This is why India matters so much right now. It is not just rising, It is being tested, and the result of that test could shape this century. Please do not forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.